everyone, it's Shannon here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create this splashy rainbow background with Distress Oxides. This has become one of my favorite ways to make backgrounds, and typically I use Tombow Duo Brush pens, but today I wanted to show you how to do something pretty similar with Distress Oxides. We're going to start out with the Wildflowers stamp set. This is from the July release and one of my favorites. I'm going to be stamping these flowers onto an A2 panel of Bristol paper. Bristol comes in vellum or smooth, so two different types. Either will work. Watercolor paper will work as well, so lots of different options for paper for this. I'm going to start by inking up my stamp here in a Distress Oxide. I will ink it up and stamp it twice. I want to make sure I get a good impression but also a fair amount of ink onto my panel so I have enough color to kind of move around and cover the surface. After I've stamped that first flower in Fossilized Amber, which is my yellow, I'm going to move, that's kind of like my middle of my rainbow. I'm going to move back to the left side of my rainbow, the warm side, and start working with those colors. So I stamped this flower in Candied Apple Distress Oxide, again stamping it twice to make sure I've got a good amount of ink on there. Then I'll squeeze in one little guy here. He's going to be my pink, which is Picked Raspberry. You definitely don't need to use all these colors, but I do love to have a very colorful rainbow. I like to include a lot. And for this little guy, he's going to be my Orange Spice Marmalade. So I kind of squeezed a couple down in there to fit in my whole rainbow. Now we're going to move on to kind of the cool side, starting with a green. I'm going to stamp this guy in Mowed Lawn and just ink him up and stamp him twice as well. And of course, I'm using Distress Oxides for this, but you can use Distress Inks as well. Both will work if you have those instead. Now moving on to my blue, I've picked out Mermaid Lagoon, one of my favorites. And once I finish with this Mermaid Lagoon, I only have 2 more colors to go. So this is actually a 8-colored rainbow, pretty full. Definitely, again, you do not have to use all those colors, but I do really like a very colorful or multicolored, I guess, rainbow. So here I'm moving on to that blueprint sketch, that kind of nice dark indigo kind of blue. And once I stamp this last flower, I'll have a tiny little spot left for my purple, which is that Seedless Preserves. Now, once I stamp this, you'll see we have a really pretty rainbow kind of array of these wildflowers. And I honestly think you could stop right here with the card. This looks so pretty. If you want to make it a little bit more grand, you could repeat this rainbow pattern of flowers at the top of your panel as well. I think that would be super beautiful. Both of these would be really pretty designs, but we're going to go and take it one step further with this splashy background. To make this background, you'll need a spray bottle with water and one of these rocket air blasters. Now these are used to clean camera lenses, but a lot of alcohol ink kind of artists have this in their tool belt for moving alcohol ink. We are going to use it, like you see me doing here, to move that watercolor around or that liquid ink around. So I've spritzed my panel with water that activates that Distress Oxide, and now I'm just blasting it with air, blowing it with air to create these like drippy marks at the top of my panel, or kind of, I guess, at the top of my flowers, and then move that color to fill it out at the bottom. I've finished that, so I'm going to let that dry. Now I'm going to move on to stamping some flowers and a butterfly from that set in Intense Black ink. This is a Honeybee ink and it is alcohol friendly, which is perfect because I'm going to do some alcohol ink coloring to these. So I've let this dry and now I'm ready to color it. I'm going to start with my larger flower here. Now I want this to look white, or I want these petals to be white. My solution for white areas is to use a very light blue. So I started with Beachy 10 and colored the petals a little bit, and now I'm adding a little bit darker blue-green kind of color, which is BG34. Now moving on to this yellow, this is Y15 to color the top of that, or the center of that flower, and the wings. Then on to this kind of tan yellow, which is YR23. Now I'm going to move on to a brown for that center of the flower. That's my darkest shade for that center. And then I'll go back through with YR23 and then finish with Y15 to create a nice gradation. Now back to the butterfly, I have an orange picked out for the tips of the wings, and then I'll go back through with YR23 and then Y15 to finish that butterfly out. Now for the stems and leaves, I have two greens picked out, a light and a dark. I'm just finishing up here with my darker shade to add a little shadow, and then I'll blend it out a little bit back with my lighter color again. So I went ahead off camera and colored the other leaves and stems with the same combo, and now I'm going to finish up this flower with a brown center, started with E57 and then added shadow with E77. For the petals, this flower is going to be orange, as you can see. So I'm coloring with my lighter shade orange here, which is YR04, coloring almost the entire petal, kind of avoiding the center because I'm going to go over that with my darker shades. Moving on to my medium shade, which is YR07, and just coloring in from the center and out a little bit, and then finishing up with R05, just for the very center to make it a little bit darker and create some more shadows. And now I'm just blending it out with the three colors once more. So I went ahead and die cut these out with the matching dies, and now we're going to move on to our sentiment. So I have this super awesome set. I love this one. It's called Miss You Big Time. It has these beautiful big scripty sentiments with linear sub-sentiments. I love that combo. I'm going to start by just stamping this large scripty thank you in intense black ink onto a scrap of white cardstock. After I've stamped it a couple times to make sure I get a really nice impression, I'll then use the matching dies and die cut it out. And look at how gorgeous this looks die cut out. Love it. Now I have a bit of scrap black cardstock in my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp and heat emboss one of the sub-sentiments from that set. So I've applied some anti-static powder, stamped it in Versamark ink. Now I'm going to dip it into some white embossing powder and then heat set with my heat tool. Now that this is heat set, I went ahead and trimmed it down to a strip with a ruler and X-Acto knife, and now I'm ready to kind of bring this card together. I'm going to start by adding glue to the back side of my watercolor panel, which is now completely dry, and adhere it onto an A2 top folding white card base. I will hold it here for a second, even place one of my plates for my die cutting machine to make sure it kind of dries flat, and then I'll move on to arranging all of my images and my sentiments. Once I get everything the way I want it, I'll then grab this piece of press and seal and kind of hold everything in place for a second while I quickly trim off that excess from the flowers. And then I will carefully peel back the piece of press and seal, keeping everything, all my sentiments and my images where I want them. And then I'll start to add a bunch of foam adhesive to the backside. And I added it to the backside of everything, the sentiment and all of my images. Remove the backing. Now I'm just lining it back up, and then I will press it back down, and the press and seal, you can see, holds everything in place, which is awesome. And then I'll just remove it after I give it a good press, and I'm practically done with this card. All I have left is some sequins that I want to add. I am using the sequin pack called Charming. There's some really pretty clear sequins in here, so I'm just going to pull those out of the pack here, kind of arrange them around my flowers and butterfly, and then I'll use Morning Dew Nuvo Crystal Drops as kind of my adhesive for adhering these sequins in place. And once I finish that, my card is complete. And I'll hold it to camera so you can get a good look at all the details in this card. I really love how this background looks. I love the kind of outline you get from by stamping the flowers in the Distress Oxide first. And then of course that splashy rainbow is just so pretty and really is a nice backdrop for those beautiful Copic colored flowers and butterfly. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.